After my husband's funeral, I went to my sister's son's first birthday party, and she announced, "My son is your husband's child. So, as inheritance, I'll take half of your $800,000 house." She even showed me his will. I said, "Oh, I see. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." That will wasn't even printed on legal paper. It was resume stock, heavy, cream-colored, with a watermark that caught the late afternoon sun filtering through the French doors of my parents' Lake Geneva estate. Abigail held it out like a royal decree, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the edge. Beside her, in a high chair that cost more than my first car, my nephew Jack was smashing a fistful of organic blueberry cake into his mouth, completely oblivious that his mother was currently auctioning off his paternity to the highest bidder. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I just felt a cold, sharp bubble of laughter rising in my throat. It wasn't hysteria. It was the absurdity of it all. It was the realization that my sister thought she was playing chess, but she didn't even know what game board we were on. The 3 weeks leading up to this moment had been a blur of grayscale. David's funeral had been an exercise in performance art. My parents, Elizabeth and Todd, had turned it into a networking event. They'd spent more time worrying about the floral arrangements matching the season's color palette than they had about the fact that their son-in-law was dead at 35. I remember standing by the grave, watching the dirt hit the casket, and feeling absolutely nothing. Just a vast, quiet emptiness. People kept telling me I was in shock. They whispered about my composure, calling it brave or dignified. But it wasn't dignity, it was clarity. Grief acts like a filter. It strips away all the noise, all the social niceties, all the patience you think you have for petty nonsense. When the worst thing imaginable has already happened, when the person who anchored you to the earth is gone, everything else just feels small, manageable. My sister's greed didn't feel like a betrayal. It felt like a transaction I was about to decline. I looked around the room. The lake set was watching, breathless. These were people who thrived on gossip, who traded scandals like currency. My parents were standing near the buffet, frozen. My mother's hand was at her throat, clutching her pearls, but her eyes weren't on me, they were on the guests. She wasn't worried about my heart breaking, she was calculating the social fallout. "Did you hear me, Sierra?" Abigail's voice pitched up, a little brittle now. "Jack is David's son. We had an affair, he wanted us provided for." She looked so triumphant. She thought she had dropped a bomb. She didn't know she had just walked onto a landmine. "I heard you," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, calm, detached, like I was ordering coffee. "I see the paper. Abigail." I didn't tell her then. I didn't tell her that David and I had secrets of our own. Secrets we had built a fortress around. I just turned, picked up my purse, and walked out of the garden. Behind me, the silence was louder than any scream. I walked past the pristine hydrangeas, past the dock, where David's vintage boat bobbed in the water, and got into my car. I didn't drive home. I drove to the one place Abigail couldn't reach, the one place where the truth was stored. We had kept the secret for 7 years. It wasn't shame that made us hide it, it was protection. In a family like mine, information is ammunition. If you have a weakness, they exploit it. If you have a struggle, they monetize it for sympathy points at the country club. David understood that better than anyone. He used to say my family viewed people as NPCs, non-player characters, in the video game of their lives. We existed only to facilitate their storylines. So when we found out about the sterility, we locked it down. We built an architecture of silence around our marriage. We let people think we were waiting or focused on careers. We let my mother make snide comments about my ticking clock. We let Abigail make jokes about us being too selfish for kids. We took every hit, every invasive question, and we swallowed it. Because the alternative, letting them into our pain, was unthinkable. Privacy wasn't just a preference for us. It was a survival strategy. It was the only way to keep something pure in a world that wanted to consume us. I pulled up to the secure storage facility on the outskirts of town. It was climate-controlled, nondescript, boring. The kind of place you drive past 1,000 times without noticing. David was a tech entrepreneur. He didn't trust clouds he didn't control, and he didn't trust paper he couldn't lock up. I keyed in the code. The heavy metal door slid open with a groan. Inside, amidst boxes of old prototypes and tax returns, was a fireproof safe. I knew the combination by heart. It was the date we met, backwards. I opened it and found the file immediately. It was thin, blue, labeled simply, medical. I flipped it open. There it was. The report from the Mayo Clinic, dated 7 years ago. Diagnosis: azoospermia secondary to bilateral orchitis, mumps infection, in adolescence. Prognosis: irreversible sterility. It was signed, stamped, and irrefutable. Jack was adorable. Jack was sweet. But Jack was biologically, medically, absolutely not David's son. I closed the file. I felt a surge of something hot and fierce in my chest. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was protectiveness. Abigail wasn't just trying to steal my house. She was trying to rewrite David's history. She was trying to turn my honorable, loyal husband into a cheater who abandoned a child. She was defiling the only thing I had left of him, his integrity. I put the file in my bag. But I didn't leave yet. David had told me once, if anything ever happens to me, check the digital vault. The key is in the safe. I found a USB drive taped to the inside cover of the medical file. It was labeled, "In case of emergency." I plugged it into my laptop, sitting there on the cold concrete floor. The drive was encrypted, but I knew the password. It was the name of the boat we restored together, Lady Jane. The folder opened. It wasn't just financial records, it was audio files, dozens of them, dates, timestamps, and one folder labeled Abigail. I sat there on the cold concrete for another hour, listening to the files. Each recording was a brick in the wall of my sister's character, or lack thereof. Voicemails from 3 years ago, drunken rants from 2 years ago, threats to ruin him if he didn't pay off her credit cards. It wasn't a one-time mistake, it was a campaign. I closed the laptop. I didn't feel sad anymore, I felt armed. I drove back to the estate in silence. The sun was setting, casting long bruised shadows across the water. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a familiar silver Mercedes parked near the front steps. My parents. Of course. I walked inside. They were in the sunroom, the one David had renovated with floor-to-ceiling glass to capture the morning light. Now, it just felt exposed. Elizabeth was pacing, her heels clicking a nervous staccato on the slate tiles. Todd was pouring himself a scotch from David's decanter without asking. "You left," my mother said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "You left the party, Sierra. Do you have any idea how that looked?" I placed my bag on the table. Inside was the medical file and the USB drive. I stared at them. Abigail told 300 people my husband had an illegitimate child. "And you're worried about my exit etiquette?" "Abigail is emotional," Todd said, taking a sip of the stolen scotch. "She's grieving too, in her own way." "She's grieving a paycheck, Todd," I said, "not a person." My mother stopped pacing. She smoothed the front of her linen dress, a gesture I recognized. It meant she was about to rewrite reality. "We need to be practical, Sierra. The rumors are already starting. If we fight this publicly, it's going to be ugly. The paternity test? The courts? It's tawdry. David wouldn't want his name dragged through the mud. So, what are you suggesting?" "Settle," she said. The word hung in the air, heavy and rotten. "Give her the share she's asking for," acknowledged Jack. "It keeps the money in the family, it keeps the peace." I looked at them, really looked at them for the first time in years. I saw the fraying cuffs on my father's shirt. I saw the tension around my mother's eyes that Botox couldn't quite hide. And suddenly, the math added up. "You're broke," I said. It wasn't a guess. It was a conclusion. Todd flinched. "We have liquidity issues. The market has been—" "You're broke," I repeated, my voice flat. "And you need Abigail to win this claim, because you need access to David's estate. You're not here to mediate. You're here to secure your retirement." They didn't deny it. They didn't even look ashamed. They looked annoyed that I had noticed. This is the fundamental flaw in how narcissists view the world. They operate on a hidden ledger. In their minds, I am not a person. I am an asset they invested in. They raised me, they educated me, or took credit for it, and now, my success is their dividend. David's death wasn't a tragedy to them. It was a liquidity event. They felt entitled to his legacy, not because they loved him, but because they believed they owned me. It's the right thing to do, my mother said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Jack is family. You can't turn your back on family. I'm not turning my back, I said. I'm looking you in the eye. I didn't tell them about the vasectomy. I didn't tell them about the recordings. I realized then that if I showed them the proof now, they would just pivot. They would help Abigail craft a new lie. They would warn her. Information is ammunition. You don't fire warning shots at people who are trying to loot your house. Get out, I said. Sierra, be reasonable. Get out of my house. And put down my husband's scotch. Todd set the glass down so hard a hairline fracture appeared in the crystal. They left without another word, the heavy oak door slamming shut behind them. I locked the door. Then I engaged the deadbolt. Then I set the alarm. I walked back to the sunroom and picked up the glass Todd had used. I carried it to the kitchen and dropped it into the trash. The sound of it shattering was the only noise in the empty house. I wasn't a widow anymore. I was a prosecutor building a case. And court was about to be in session. I called David's lawyer, Mr. Sterling, the next morning. He was an older man, precise and formal, with an office in downtown Lake Geneva that smelled of leather and old money. He had always liked me, I think, because I didn't treat David like a bank account. When I walked in, he stood up and took my hand. Sierra, I am so sorry for your loss. And I am sorry for what I hear happened yesterday. News travels fast in a small town. It's about to get worse, I said. I sat down and laid out everything. The forged will Abigail had presented. The threats from my parents. And then, I handed him the blue medical file. Mr. Sterling put on his reading glasses. He read the report in silence. When he looked up, his expression was grim. This changes everything, he said. This proves fraud. Attempted extortion. We can have her arrested. I know, I said. But there's more. I handed him the USB drive. David left this for me. It's a dead man's switch. He said it would activate if anything happened to him. Mr. Sterling plugged it into his computer. We watched the folder open on his large monitor. There were hundreds of files. Financial records, emails, and the audio recordings I had found the night before. Play the one labeled Blackmail, Attempt 2019, I said. Mr. Sterling clicked the file. Abigail's voice filled the room, slurred and angry. You think you're better than us just because you made money? You're nothing without Sierra. And if you don't pay off my credit cards, I'm going to tell everyone you hit me. Who are they going to believe? The rich guy? Or the poor sister-in-law? David's voice was calm on the recording. Go ahead, Abigail, tell them. But know that I'm recording this. And if you ever threaten me or Sierra again, I will release it. Mr. Sterling sat back in his chair, looking stunned. This isn't just a family dispute, he said quietly. This is a pattern of criminal behavior. She's been targeting him for years. And my parents knew, I said. They had to. They were always cleaning up her messes. Mr. Sterling looked at me over his glasses. So what do you want to do, Sierra? We have enough here to put her in prison for a long time, and your parents could be implicated as accessories if they knew about the blackmail. I looked out the window at the lake, glittering in the morning sun. I thought about Jack, innocent and sweet, caught in the middle of this war. I thought about the life David and I had built, the privacy we had fought so hard for. I want them gone, I said. I don't want a trial. I don't want a scandal that drags David's name through the mud for months. I want them out of my life. Out of this town. And out of my future. Forever. Mr. Sterling nodded. We can do that. I'll draft the paperwork. A binding settlement agreement. They sign away any claim to the estate. They agree to a permanent restraining order, and they leave Lake Geneva. If they ever break the terms, or if they ever speak about this to anyone, the evidence goes straight to the district attorney. Do it, I said. He started typing. The sound of the keys was the only sound in the room. It sounded like a gavel coming down. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was spring it. I convened the meeting in the library. It was the darkest room in the house, lined with walnut shelves and David's first editions. I sat behind his massive desk, a fortress of mahogany. I wore black. Not morning black, executive black. They arrived at noon. Abigail breezed in first, wearing a white sundress that cost more than the child support she wasn't getting. My parents followed, trying to look solemn but vibrating with anticipation. They thought they were walking into a negotiation. They thought they were leaving with a check that would save their country club membership. "Let's get this over with," Abigail said, dropping into one of the leather wingback chairs. "I have a showing at 2. "There is no showing," I said. My voice didn't echo, the books absorbed it. "And there is no settlement." I slid the first file across the desk. It spun perfectly, stopping right at the edge in front of my father. "What is this?" Todd asked, picking it up. "That is the reason Jack isn't David's son," I said. "It's a medical impossibility. David was sterile since he was 16. "Mumps." The room went so quiet I could hear the dust settling. Abigail let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "That's a lie. He never told anyone that." "He told me," I said. "We kept it private, to protect ourselves from people exactly like you." My mother snatched the paper from my father. Her eyes scanned the Mayo Clinic letterhead. Her face went gray. She wasn't looking at the medical facts, she was looking at her retirement plan evaporating. This could be forged," she stammered, looking at me with desperate eyes. "You could have faked this." "I didn't fake the forensic accounting," I said, sliding the second file. "I know about the second mortgage, Todd. I know about the maxed out credit lines. I know you're 3 months away from foreclosure." My father shrank. The bluster, the arrogance, it drained out of him, leaving a scared old man in a frayed shirt. Abigail stood up, her face twisting. "I don't care about their money. I care about what David promised me." "David didn't promise you anything," I said. I placed the laptop on the desk, facing them. "He promised me that if you ever tried this, I should use this." I pressed the spacebar. The audio filled the room. It was crisp, clear, and damning. Abigail's voice, 3 years younger, slurring with entitlement and gin. "I'm going to tell everyone you hit me. Who are they going to believe?" Abigail froze. She looked like a statue of herself, caught in the moment of her own destruction. My mother slowly turned to look at her golden child. For the first time in 28 years, she didn't look at Abigail with adoration. She looked at her with revulsion. Not because Abigail was a blackmailer, but because Abigail had been sloppy enough to get caught. "You recorded him?" Abigail whispered, her voice trembling. "He recorded you," I corrected. "Because he knew who you were. He knew you were a predator." Then, the implosion happened. It wasn't a bang, it was a screeching tear. "You told us he led you on," my mother screamed at Abigail, her composure shattering. "You told us it was a sure thing. We bet everything on this." "You pushed me," Abigail shrieked back, her face mottled and ugly. "You told me to get the money, you told me to fix it. I didn't tell you to commit a felony." Todd roared. They were eating each other alive. The golden child, the enablers, the image, it was all dissolving into a puddle of recriminations and greed. I sat back in David's chair and watched. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt like a coroner determining the cause of death. I let them scream for 2 minutes, then I slammed my hand on the desk. "Enough." They stopped. They looked at me, the spare, the widow, the obstacle. But they realized then that I wasn't the obstacle. I was the judge. "The police are not here," I said, my voice cutting through the air conditioning hum. "Yet. But Mr. Sterling has the files. And he has a very low tolerance for extortion." Abigail slumped back into the chair, covering her face. My parents looked at the floor. The autopsy was complete. The lie was dead. Mr. Sterling slid a stack of documents across the mahogany desk. They landed with a heavy thud, right next to the audio files that had just dismantled my family. "Option A," I said, my voice steady. Mr. Sterling calls the district attorney. We hand over the recordings, the forged will, and the forensic accounting. You go to prison for extortion and fraud. Dad loses his license. Mom loses her social standing. Abigail loses custody when she's incarcerated. I watched them flinch. The reality of it, orange jumpsuits, mugshots, the total annihilation of the image they worshipped was finally sinking in. Or option B, I continued. You sign these. It's a full disclaimer of interest in David's estate. It includes a binding non-disclosure agreement. You will never speak of Jack's paternity again. You will never speak of me again. And you will put your house on the market and leave Lake Geneva within 60 days. Leave? My mother whispered. But our friends, our club memberships? You can't afford the memberships, Elizabeth, I said. And your friends will find out eventually anyway. This is me giving you a chance to leave with your dignity intact. It's more than you gave David. Todd picked up the pen first. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He signed. Then, he pushed the paper to my mother. She signed, weeping silently, not for me, but for the address she was losing. Abigail was last. She looked at me with pure hatred, but the fight was gone. She was a bully who had finally met someone she couldn't intimidate. She scribbled her name, threw the pen down, and walked out. My parents followed her like ghosts. When the front door clicked shut, the silence that rushed back into the house wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. Mr. Sterling packed up his briefcase. You did good, Sierra, he said softly. He would have been proud. I walked him to the door, locked it, and then went out the back. The sun was beginning to dip low over the water, turning the lake into a sheet of hammered copper. I walked down to the dock, the wood warm under my feet. The Lady Jane was bobbing gently in her slip. David had spent 2 years restoring her, sanding down every inch of teak, polishing the brass until it sang. He loved this boat, because you couldn't fake it. You couldn't cut corners with the ocean or the lake. If you didn't do the work, you sank. I ran my hand along the gunwale. I felt the vibration of the water through the hull. I was alone. I had no parents, no sister, no husband. The estate was empty, but for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel lonely. I felt light. I had burned down the lies to protect the truth. I had stood in the fire and refused to burn. The legacy wasn't the money, it wasn't the house. It was the integrity to know who you are, and the strength to defend it when the people you love try to sell it out. If you've ever had to stand alone to protect the truth, share this story. You are the keeper of the legacy.